Understanding how is your unique energy wired is kind of a recipe for success as far as setting yourself up to have the greatest level of fulfillment, whether it is relationships, health, or wealth. And I feel like we could talk in depth at length on any of those three topics. Um, but this is a short session, relatively speaking, compared to the iceberg that is human design. And the next thing I want to talk about is something that I think this applies to really any tool for studying yourself, or even things like going to a therapist, going to a life coach, looking at your natal chart, looking at your human design chart, any of these external sources of information about you. I think this is kind of a public service announcement that covers all of that. And that is nobody knows you like you know you. Okay, so we look to tools like human design to understand ourselves better, but human design as a chart is not telling you how you should be. Your natal chart is not telling you how you should be. A third party external person cannot tell you how you should be. So it is important that as we go through today's session, as you go through any of your study on human design, that you're constantly feeling inside of yourself to check in with yourself about how does this feel for me? Does it feel true for me? Does it feel helpful to me? Does it make me feel like I open and blossom and become more of myself? Or does it make me feel like I'm less? Does it constrict me inside of my body? The human design chart is not necessarily a picture of like what you're trying to become. It's not just one more box that we're trying to put you into. It's a system for being able to decode what does feel good inside of you and to possibly give you some language for understanding that. So anytime you're looking into a system like human design, natal charts, again, the whole list applies here. As you go through it and as you're studying and deepening your knowledge, ask yourself regularly, why do I want to know this? Right? There's like a lot of head curiosity that can take us down rabbit holes and like let us lead us in our research and lead us into gathering knowledge. And that's all well and good. But also at the end of the day, what is your heart and soul really reaching for by wanting to know about that? What is the felt experience? What's the memory, the lived experience that's wanting to have a home, right? So, like connecting the knowledge that we're gathering from tools like human design with our lived experience, I think is very important for grounding this knowledge and this wisdom back into ourselves and using it to make our life better. Right. Again, I think we can get in our head and be very curious and learn all the things, but is it making your life better? Because that's ultimately, I think my theory, my opinion, what the tool is for, is to improve the satisfaction and fulfillment that you're able to find in your life. So as we go through the questions today, and as we go through the different aspects of it, that's really where I'm coming from as far as like, how can we use human design to make your life better for you, right? And one premise that I'll start off with is that your energy is good. The way your energy is wired is perfect. It couldn't be any better. And I know that because it is what it is. You have this specific wiring of your energy, and that makes it perfect for you. And that leads me into one of the foundational concepts of human design is the concept of conditioning and deconditioning. So this is probably pretty basic if you've spent any time inside of human design, but I'm going to tell you my definitions of these two things. And from kind of that growth mindset I invited you into on the first session, allow for any deepening of understanding or any intuitive download from your higher self to come in and possibly reveal what is the next step for your personal deconditioning journey. Conditioning, interestingly enough, and I'm going to share screen for this just to have a visual to really solidify what I'm talking about here. So when you look at your chart, the energy centers, and can you see my screen? I think so. You guys are leaning in. So when you look at your chart, there are 9 energy centers on the body graph. And these energy centers are the different shapes So there's triangles and squares and diamonds and all of that. If they are colored in, those are defined energy centers, and we can talk more about that if you want, if that's one of the pieces you're curious about. What I'm talking about though right now are the white boxes on your chart. So I want you to take your chart side by side with this concept and count how many how many of the shapes, how many of the energy centers are white on your specific chart. And mine is 7. So just, and this is probably why, because I have mostly, almost all, other than 2, of these white energy centers. And so how does that relate to conditioning? Your white energy centers are the energy centers where your conditioning is able to come into you. So if you have a colored in energy center, that energy center is not open to being conditioned. It has a set pattern of operation. It has a set energy that you are wired with. And therefore, nobody's programming you to be any different. There's like pure authenticity inside of those colored in energy centers. And then for the white ones, those are open. Those are like sponges. Okay. And so any white center that you have is a sponge. And you think about the more white centers you have, the more open you are to being conditioned. And the more open you are to being conditioned, the greater level of deconditioning that you're going to need to do. So, what do I mean by conditioned? I mean other people's ways, other people's beliefs, other people's methods sinking into your beingness. So like I use the example of like when I was young, both of my parents are extremely hard workers and they're both generators and they believe in hard work, they believe that it makes you successful, on and on and on. I took that methodology of hard work makes you successful, hard work is valuable, etc. I say I was raised in the cult of hard work. I was conditioned with that ideology, and it has almost brought me to the brink of ending my life on multiple occasions. Being so burnt out, being so depressed, being so at the end of my rope that I just can't stand it. And when I study human design, that's because like I'm a non-energy type. I'm not meant to work hard. It's not part of who I am. I'm meant to rest 80% of the time. And when I'm inspired, when I have a creative urge, then I work really hard for however long the creative urge lasts, and then I go back into rest. And they taught me rest is lazy. And so these are conditioned ideas that I absorbed as a child that as part of my deconditioning journey, as part of like shedding all of these things that I am not to reveal my authenticity underneath, it is, they say deconditioning happens in 7-year cycles. So like if you've known for 7 years that like I'm not meant to work hard, I'm meant to rest and work when I'm inspired to, it takes at least 7 years to start to get that idea out of your system. And then another 7 to like really get it out of your system. And then another 7 to like be totally pure. So like deconditioning takes decades. Right. And that's because when it got in there, when we're like 7 and under, we have no conscious mind to discern. We're purely unconscious. We soak it up, we take it as fact, and we don't question any of it. We build our entire life around these ideas that we're taught when we're small. So the more white energy centers you have on your body graph, the more susceptible you are to conditioning. I'll also say those white energy centers, they don't just take in the energy, they take it in and then they amplify it. So, like you think about an amplifier hooked up to a guitar. A guitar is playing and it's at a certain sound. You hook it up to an amplifier, now the guitar is playing, but the amplifier is making it so much more than the guitar is by itself. So, like you think about if I'm sitting next to a negative person, that person feels their negativity at a certain level. I feel their negativity amplified, right? And so like they used to tell me when I was small all the time, they're like, you're making such a big deal out of this. It's not that big a deal. You're being way too sensitive, way too dramatic about this. And I didn't have the language to tell them, excuse me, I'm amplifying your energy. Right? Could you imagine a child saying that back to the adult? But that's what was happening. Was like, right, it isn't that big a deal for you, but in my system, I've taken your little not that big a deal and I've turned it up to 100. And in my system, it is a big deal.